As a reminder, you can find links to all the deck lists and tournament results in the description down below. And if you're a huge Pioneer fan like I am, you can tune in every single Tuesday evening at 6:15 p.m. on the link in the description to SV Card Art's live stream for live casted Paper Pioneer by yours truly. Let's get to the video. This weekend was a doozy for Pioneer, as there were a lot of decks that jumped into challenges that we either haven't seen at all before or have gotten some upgrades just in recent times with new cards or new synergies between new and old cards popping up. Now, I won't waste too long since we have a lot to go over, starting with a quick mention to what I'm calling One Card Wonders, a section where I want to call out lists that we've seen before but have tweaked a single card in order to make things a little more interesting. First off, we'll start with Poseidon, who took your normal Gruul Prowess deck and added a card I personally haven't played since Dinosaur Stompy decks in the original Ixalan Ravnica version 3 standard rotation. I'm talking about Collision Colossus. Now, this split card is usually used for the Colossus part, giving a large amount of +4 power to a single target for just a combination of 2 Gruul mana. Now, combined with a Leyline of Resonance in this build of the Gruul deck, a singleton Colossus on a Heartfire hero would turn it into a 10 power beater on turn 2. That connects, and then whether it connects or dies the next turn, it's lights out. Now, pilot KYTK321 took everyone's favorite combo deck to hate on, Lotus Field combo, and threw in a Pro Tour All-Star in Stock Up from Aetherdrift. Now, this Dig Through Time light allows the deck to dig deep for the cards it needs, rather than worrying about card velocity. Now, while Memory Deluge is right there at 1 extra blue mana pip, Stock Up digs 1 deeper for the first time and finds 2 cards, allowing you to find the pieces you need to combo all at once. Now, technically, this deck had 2 hits, as 2 copies of Monument of Endurance were also lurking in the sideboard. Last up for the One Card Wonders, let's take a look at Strong Mind's Dimir Ninjas list, which put a copy of Dokuchi Silencer in the sideboard for a surprise, bitter triumph style of ambush effect. Now, props to the card being an actual factual ninja as well in this list, adding to the list of the cards alongside Moon Circuit Hacker, Thousand Face Shadow, and Biting Palm Ninja. Although this one doesn't have a hyphen, so maybe it's not an actual ninja. Let's get to talking about the challenges, because Friday gave us 2 challenges with a plethora of decks I want to highlight, so we're going to talk about both of those, which includes the top 4 deck from the first challenge of the day, which is a very special take on the Dimir Demons archetype. And although there were 2 Rakdos versions that finished higher in the standings alongside a different Dimir deck in Dimir Bounce, I'm still going to talk about that deck later. Now, there's another Boros Burn list, which from the last video continues to put up top 8 performances in these Pioneer challenges, while Gruul Prowess, another Demons deck, and an Is It Phoenix deck rounded out those top 8. Alright, let's talk Demons, or technically a lack thereof, from pilot Kanara 38204 or 38,204, whichever your cup of tea is. But their Dimir take on the deck still features the Demon Nomenclature All-Star in Unholy Annex in all of its demonic glory, but that's where the demons stop outside of the 4 Mutavaults in the land base. Now, instead, the deck pulls in a couple of different directions that we've seen Dimir go in Pioneer's history, including Floodpitch Drowner and Kaito Bane of Nightmares as one of its angles of attack. However, it also packs the seemingly forgotten package of Jace Reawakened and Valki, God of Lies, to allow for Jace to plot away basically a free Tibble the following turn. Now, alongside Jace, however, is Malcolm Alluring Scoundrel, with which enough chorus counters on it can also sneak a Tibalt into play. Now, Nashi, Searcher in the Dark, lines up as a good early creature with Menace that also works as a way to find all of our different pieces in our deck, since they all happen to be legendary or enchantments, which adds some needed card selection to our deck. Now, Experimental Augury is the other card draw spell of choice, as the proliferate effect attached to this slightly overcosted draw 1 spell can add stun counters, +1/+1 counters, loyalty counters, or even Malcolm's chorus counters to our creatures while netting a card in the process. Now, just outside those top 8 of decks was Shock Troopa's Boros Heroic list, which in all technicalities was the lightest Mardu splash in the world for claim fame, and technically Kala's Sellsword. Now, the deck featured Leyline of Resonance as an angle of attack from here, making it apt for a ton of pump spells, hence the heroic nomenclature. Now, this allowed for Boros All-Star Illuminator Virtuoso to shine again as a double-striking, conniving threat that could easily get up to 3 power off of the double connives from being targeted with a Leyline in play, while a turn inside out type effect would give it an additional 6 power, which then puts it up to 18 damage from just one double-striking swing. Now, the addition of Inti, Seneschal of the Sun, gives another way for creatures to gain trample in this list while providing a tiny bit of extra card velocity while allowing you to discard redundant creatures that you can claim back to life, or extra copies of cards like Ancestral Anger to make the casted one more powerful. Now, skirting in at a 3-3 record was Hernan72's Azorius Ensoul deck, rocking 2 Aetherdrift cards in Memory Guardian and Mendicant Core Guidelight. Now, Core teams up with Big Score All-Star Simulacrum Synthesizer in order to make extremely powerful attackers in a list that can also throw a pair of scissors onto a Darksteel Citadel as early as turn 2. Now, plenty of enters the battlefield makes an artifact 1-drops like the Inspectors and the Siren add to this angle of attack, while interactive spells like Metallic Rebuke, Portable Hole, and Sheltered by Ghost try to keep the coast clear for your artifacts to swing in for lethal. Now, Memory Guardian can come down as early as turn 3 in some games, while waiting a turn to trigger the Synthesizer is never a bad thing to have a follow-up with. Now, likewise, Cryptic Coat gives you an additional long game angle as it can do its best Batterskull impression to keep bouncing itself, triggering the Synthesizer every single time it gets onto the battlefield again. That creates a construct alongside whatever you're going to manifest, which could potentially flip over into another creature like a Mendicant Core, and all of a sudden you're just going completely wide and having an unblockable threat as well. Now, the later challenge on Friday boasted 50 players and saw the aforementioned Lotus Field combo deck from those 1-card wonder section take first place, while Rakdos Demons took second and later down the line top 8 finishes. Gruul Prowess also had top 4 and top 8 slots in the list, while Enigmatic Incarnation took up the last top 4 slot, and Dimir Bounce and Jun's Sacrifice rounded out the overall top 8 for the second Friday event. Now, we're going to look just below the top 8 of decks to highlight a slightly different take on the Dimir Bounce deck in the hands of pilot Niku, who hit a top 16 with a list that featured 2 heavy hitter cards that could benefit from what the Bounce deck is putting down, or picking up and putting down again. Oildeep Gearhulk provides a 4/4 lifelink threat with ward of its own in order to give itself a little bit of protection and a little bit more power on the battlefield, while bouncing the card can replace what our opponent has in hand with a card from the top of their library. Now, in tandem with Hopeless Nightmare, we can get our opponent either empty-handed or pretty much just down to useless leftover cards quite easily in combination of these 2 discard effects. Now, additionally, Rottenmouth Viper gives us something to do with our low-cost permanents that we're unable to bounce or no longer need to. Now, if the Viper survives long enough to attack, we can quickly destroy the opponent's board or life total or hand, while bouncing the Viper is a costly thing to do, but also allows us to do the same thing over and over again with higher amounts of mana available to us later on in the game, like when you don't have Storm Chaser's talent and this town ain't big enough available for that 7 mana, you can just use 6 of it to cast the Viper over and over and over again and bounce it with some of the other bounce spells from your list. Now, in yet another showing of Dimir dominance, actual factual Dimir Rogues went 3-3 in the challenge in the hands of Pilot Roughmar, as the list was pretty much a blast from the past and not really leaning too far into the shenanigans that the Demons and Ninjas list have been doing. Now, while a singleton Kaito is present, Thieves Guild Enforcer, Soaring Thought Thief, and Big Bad Xerath San are all still playing together while trying to mill our opponents or take them down to 0 life, whichever just so happens to come first. Now, a couple of copies of Picklock Prankster, which is a rogue by the way, help to find removal spells, while Graveyard Trespasser, which notably not a rogue on that one, that's a werewolf, can hit things that we don't want staying in our opponent's graveyard after we ourselves put them there. Now, Saturday gave us one challenge with 39 players and a decent amount of stuff to look at. Although the event was won by Is It Phoenix, Atarka Red came in second place, while Dimir Ninjas, Mono White Humans, and a Pioneer Analyst deck all made top 8 or better. Now, rounding out these lesser seen decks were more common seen ones like Rakdos Demons in top 4 and Gruul Prowess alongside Dimir Bounce in the top 8. Now, forgive the mispronunciation, but Pilot Manalaxio went wide with their second place Gruul deck rather than tall and played a more classic Atarka's command strategy with Burning Tree Emissary to power out a board full of cards and then turn them sideways with a little bit of help from their friends. Reckless Bushwhacker is the staple follow-up to a large emissary turn, while Aloe Alchemist and a Cunning Coyote can both be plotted away for a turn later where you can use them to easily enable Bushwhacker's surge cost in order to run people over with cards from Monastery Swiftspear all the way up to Screaming Nemesis. Now, you might not be stacking as much power onto something like the Prowess decks do, but the fact that everything will be getting something like +2 damage with a Bushwhacker command turn means your damage stacks up in wider, different ways with this version, although you do still have some of the single target spells from your Aloe Alchemaster, your Cunning Coyote, and a couple copies of Monstrous Rage. Mono White Humans showed back up in this challenge, foregoing the blue splash in the hands of Pilot QB Turtle 15. Now, the normal package of humans from Thalia, her lieutenant, and Adeline, Resplendent Cathar were all assembled, while the main change in the main deck was swapping out some cards like Brutal Cathar for Warden of the Inner Sky and Veteran Survivor, adding 2 lower cost but higher scaling threats to a deck so that it can present a lethal clock just a little bit faster. Now, while this does give it some less of the interactive angle, choosing to only run 4 main deck copies of Portable Hole, it does, however, go hard on some of the cards in the sideboard, such as the multiple copies of Ossification to answer opposing threats, while keeping it to monocolor allows for 14 basic planes to be played to enable the Ossification. B Madman's Pioneer Analyst deck looked as close to the old standard version as you could probably get in Pioneer without just porting it over card for card, only this one got a chance to run Fable the Mirror Breaker alongside Lumra Bellow of the Woods. Now, looking to leverage the new Capenna fetch lands, as well as Fabled Passage alongside an early Nissa Resurgent Animist or Aftermath Analyst, try saying those two 5 times fast next to each other, this deck quickly ramps up its mana and either to burn something out thanks to a Virtuous Strength, completely tripling all of your mana costs, or smack them with a giant Lumra if combat is needed. Now, cards like Ill-Timed Explosion provide Temur-colored based board wipes, while Up the Beanstalk and Memory Deluge cover our card selection. Now, one card I'm missing personally in this list is Omnath, everybody's favorite 4-mana Jelly Bean. Now, the synergy with Omnath's landfall triggers is pretty powerful, although the deck would need to kind of stretch itself a little bit into white, which isn't that hard when Nissa and all these fetches can provide that color pretty easily. World Soul's Rage is going to be able to bring back your fetches from the graveyard, so even if you don't play Omnath at 4 mana, which is slightly ahead of curve for this deck as already, you can still play it on turn 4 or later and get massive amounts of value from that and a Splunking or just a giant Analyst or Lumra turn. Now, a little further down in those standings is Jun's Citadel, a real blast from the past in the hands of Chicotech. Now, there are no cats to be found in this version of the deck, instead using elves, geese, and innkeepers in order to spit out Bolas's Citadel as quickly as possible. This allows us to pay life to play off the top of our deck, and in combination with Prosperous Innkeeper, we can do this for quite some time. Now, finding cards like Catacomb Sifter or Woe Strider in order to filter away unplayable lands after the first one from the top of our library, as well as Priest of Forgotten Gods to clear the board, draw ourselves some cards, and also refresh the top of the library, the deck wants to be able to just plop down 10 things to sacrifice with the Citadel as long as at least one of them is a Mayhem Devil, so we can deal exactly 20 damage to our opponent's face. Now, Collected Company helps get there fast, while the ETB effects from Strider and Sifter provide 2 bodies for the price of 1, which is pretty good in this style of deck. Now, we're just 1 Corvold away from basically lining this deck up like it's pre-pandemic Pioneer, only we have a Glissa in that spot instead as a little bit of utility, as well as just being able to be hit off of our Collected Companies. Pilot Just Alice played a version of the Mono Black Waste Knot deck that amped up the creature package in ways that I've wanted to explore, but never pulled the trigger on, mostly because I'm a purist that plays less creatures in these style of decks. Though, this one included a card called Concealing Curtains, which is not only an early blocker, but later can kind of become a Thought-Knot Seer type effect to the deck that actually lets you trim on some extra removal spells and keep your discard spell count high, because it's a creature that blocks all these aggressive threats early and then can kind of turn into something to help your Waste Knot later on, or just kind of turn sideways to attack a little bit later. Now, however, the Just Alice also opted in for Unstoppable Slasher, which normally provides a slow control style deck like this one with a more powerful, fast clock, even though it doesn't have the Bloodletter combo to threaten an immediate ending of the game. Now, the titular card in Waste Knot still has 4 copies to pump out a bunch of things off of spells like Go Blank and Liliana of the Veil, while Shielder the Apocalypse closes games out with some help from Gaia Reach Sanitarium just as easily as it did in the Control Shell. Now, Sunday had 2 different challenges, but only gave us 4 total lists that I want to look at, but there's 1 in the earlier event and 3 from the later event, so I'm going to do their top 8s back to back and review both of them together. So the earlier of the 2 was won by the one and only known Phoenix player, old Daniel Lakos, besting a Selesnya Cage port of the standard deck in the finals. Now, Gruul Prowess made up 3 of these top 8 slots, while Atarka Red was yet another Gruul deck in their midst. Now, Dimir Bounce and Rakdos Demons rounded out the top 8 to the first challenge of the day, while the afternoon's event was bested by Enigmatic Incarnation, with another Dimir Ninjas list actually taking the second place of the event. Yet again, we saw Atarka Red placing high in top 4, with Rakdos Demons taking 2 slots in the top 8, Azorius Control and Is It Phoenix taking 2 of the slots in top 8, and another mono red Goblins list with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, putting a slight twist on the Boros version that we saw in my last video. Selesnya Cage from Bulls Zero Eye looked at what the deck was doing in Standard and swapped it around for Pioneer with a little bit of a different package included. And while the deck still features a ton of tutorable 1-drops for Bright Glass Gearhulk to search for, it also uses Enduring Innocence in the way that the Collected Company decks are doing, alongside Sandstorm Salvager to give the deck a go wide tokens theme. Now, Voice of Resurgence is a Pioneer-only card that can't be tutored with the Gearhulk, but gives you a lot of value, especially if your opponent is trying to play instant speed removal, while Collector's Cage in general allows you to go up to Gearhulk and Overlord of the Mistmoors, which is something that the Collected Company decks just can't afford to run. Now, I won't break out the mask again since it scared a few people last time, but Goblins dropped the white and went for a much more annoying package, so to speak, as the mono red Goblins list in the hands of Wordy333 used the synergy between Krenko, Mob Boss, and both Conspicuous Snoop and Agatha's Soul Cauldron to threaten an army of goblins at the drop of a hat. Now, Draconautics Engineer not only gives all of your goblins haste for 1 exhausted mana, but it also turns itself into whatever's under the cauldron in the process because it gets a +1/+1 counter, allowing you to cranko it up and smash for tons of damage and all in the same turn. Now, this version of the deck also plays 2 different Lord effects in Runedvelt Hordemaster and Hobgoblin Bandit Lord, the latter of which can combine with Krenko, or multiple Krankos thanks to the Cauldron, to just win the game outright. A Grixis Artifact Pod list, or a Grixis Repurposing Bay deck, only put up a 2-3 record in the hands of Pilot Timu, but played a package of cards that looked pretty sweet, and I think that this archetype has some legs if you could look at the package and refine it a little bit. You start from the Enigma Jewel and can pod all the way up into Paradox Engine, the Might Stone and Weak Stone, or go down 1 mana cost and hit the Boom Mobile. because this deck is looking to turn all of its artifacts into damage while surviving an early onslaught of aggressive attackers from the Prowess decks, thanks to the help of Battle at the Bridge to give some things -X and gain a bunch of life in the process just by virtue of having a bunch of artifacts. Lastly, we had another 2 and 3 record deck that looked to just want to punish people, as pilot Bozidar 2121 played a classic archetype, Gruul Ponza. Now, for those unfamiliar with the archetype, you ramp yourself while blowing up your opponent's lands. So you have 100% of the zero-sum fun game of Magic you're trying to play. Now, Bozidar used Elves and Wolfwillow Haven to turn out every 4 mana or higher land destruction spell you could think of, from things like Crumble the Dust to remove all copies of a land from the game, to Rubble Reading, just to have a scry effect on your destroy land effect. Now, Territory Forge also made the cut, exiling any land, including your opponent's ones, just to turn itself into the most expensive 5 mana rock imaginable. Now, Ravager Worm was the Ponza creature of choice in this list, also resulting in some dead lands along the way, helping you close out the game quickly against your opponent who is struggling to play their first spell. Now, whoever said 13 was an unlucky number certainly didn't watch this video and see how many different Pioneer decks were in these challenges just this weekend. So if you are wanting to figure out what to play in Pioneer, hopefully these lists have given you some form of inspiration so you can go out and build them, or just a springboard for some of the decks like the Artifact Pod deck, so you can go out there and explore what you have options in Pioneer to play. Now, if this video has inspired you, let me know in the comments down below what you're looking forward to playing in your Pioneer events in the near future. And while you're down there, make sure to give the video a thumbs up so the YouTube algorithm recognizes that Pioneer content is still alive and kicking on the website. Now, speaking of alive and kicking, I want to give a quick shout out to my supporters who keep my channel alive and kicking through their support of this video specifically, as well as all of the videos on my main channel page. Now, if you would like to join them in getting membership perks like Discord access, personal deck techs, and early access to all of my video content and members only posts, you can click join down below or on the main homepage of my YouTube channel so that you can also show your devotion. And as always, I'd love it if you could just tap that subscribe button, because then you'll stay up to date on the latest deck techs, metagame analysis, and just general Magic and Pioneer content from me. See you at the next weekend challenges.